All right, so we're going to be going over Django beer ratings for today. Let me fork this over. We've done this probably 100 times already, so you guys should be pros at this. Always remember to fork over the challenge, otherwise you won't be able to submit any code. So I'm going to grab the URL here, copy that over. So git clone, copy or paste the URL, Django beer ratings, and open up a VS Code. So code period. We'll open up a VS Code in this directory. We'll blow that up a bit and add it to a new window. All right, so beer ratings, unlike some other challenges, we don't give you a Django project to start with. So we don't have requirements.txt. We don't have anything created for you. That's something you're gonna have to do yourself for this challenge. So let's go through those motions. Let me condense some space here. We don't need the README here. All right, so first thing I'm gonna do, let's actually make this interactive because I hate kind of listening to myself talk. You probably guys do too. Mark Stanley, you're first on my screen, but we've talked to you a lot today. So I'm gonna go to Reno. Reno, I wanna start a new Django project. What's probably the first thing I should always do in these cases?
Create a virtual environment.
Absolutely. All right, so to do that, the command is python-m VNV, which stands for virtual environment, and then give it a virtual environment name. So I always go with .vnv. Maybe just change it up. I'm going to call it .virtual, just to give some change here. So I'll call it .virtual as my file, virtual environment folder. All right, next up, Jack. How do I actually use my virtual environment here?
You have to activate it via like the venv bin script in the Mac environment.
Gotcha. What's do you remember the command for that?
I don't, because I know it on Windows. It's venv /script/activate. Oh, source. There you go.
Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah. I guess we do have different OSs. So some of us might be on, but yeah, on Macs, you want to do source, then your virtual environment name, then bin, then activate. All right. So now notice I'm prepended with that virtual, meaning I'm in my virtual environment. I'm actually gonna make this smaller. Is this too small for you guys, or should I blow it up again? All right, if anyone's
good.
I'm good. That's good for me.
If it's too small, just let me know. I can blow up again. I'm just kind of running out of space here. All right, so in my virtual environment, next up, I want to actually get a Django project started. Notice we're starting from scratch here, so it's a little different than maybe some past challenges. If Kyle Gunter, do you remember how I can get a Django project up and running? What's the next step I need to do here? All right, Kyle might not be with us. Jonas, what's the next step I need to do here?
All right, so you're gonna go ahead and type pip install Django.
Yep, pip install Django. And kind of looking ahead, I feel like for every challenge, I've always installed PsychoPG because I was anticipating to use Postgres. In this case, I'm going to use SQLite because I don't think we've done that. And also the reason I want to do this is for your assessment, we're going to recommend you use SQLite because it's easier to transfer data that way. You don't have to if you're comfortable with Postgres and just don't want to test SQLite. That's up to you. We'll just recommend SQLite and leave it to you guys. So in this case, I am going to use SQLite. So I'm not going to install PsychoPG. So we'll go with Django, which should be a quick install. All right, I think that's done here. Cool. All right, so that's installed. Next up, sorry, I forgot who I asked there. Sean, what do I do next? So I got Django installed.
Need to create a project. So Django tech admin start project, and then whatever you want to name it.
Yep. So start project. We're doing
with a dot after the name. Very important.
Yep. So Django beer ratings. Let's just go with that name. So I'll call it beer, not bear, beer ratings. I'll call that underscore project. So I like to differentiate my project from my app. So beer ratings proj. And then as Sean mentioned, you can add a period here. It's not required, but that is my preferred way because it doesn't nest folders. You just get one less level of folders you got to go through. So I always tend to do that, but dealer's choice there. So I'm going to do that. All right, so I got my beer ratings project folder, also managed Pi, which we use basically for everything else from here on out, and our README that we had initially. Before I forget, and this is something you're gonna want to do for your assessment when we look at the rubric for it, but make sure you don't include your virtual environment in your commit. And the way to do that is Sarah Delheim, how do I exclude my virtual environment folder from my actual commit when I get to committing?
You have to make a file called .getignore.
Yep. Ignore. Spell it correctly though. It has to be named getignore. And then what do I put in here?
I'm trying to remember the syntax.
Yep. I mean, I can help you out there. So basically, you just want to list a folder and put a slash after it to tell it it's a folder. So now anything called virtual is going to be ignored once I save this. Notice my virtual is kind of highlighted there. Once I save this, it's now a gray. Let me blow that up in case it's not easy to see. Now it's kind of grayed out. So VS Code is saying, all right, I see that you have a gitignore. I'm going to just kind of show you that your virtual folder, virtual environment folder is not going to be tracked with the Git project. All right, cool. So I'll just go ahead and add in PyCache. These are files that get created when you run Python files, but you usually don't want to commit them. There might be some other things I want to exclude, but
Ankur, I've got a
yep, go for it.
Can we, another way, can we just copy relative path and just kind of paste it in there as well? Like, will that work just as well, or?
What do you mean by relative path?
Like, if you right click on the virtual folder, it should say copy path or relative path.
Okay. Yeah, that seems to work. I think you need to add that slash in. If you don't have that slash, you're going to think this is a file name instead of a folder name. Let's actually
Okay,
verify
cool.
that instead of me maybe making that up. So if I take away the slash and hit save, yeah, notice, I guess my virtual environment folder is still excluded. So I guess you don't need the slash there. That might be my misunderstanding. I'm not sure how it knows if it's a file or folder. Maybe it doesn't care. But yeah, that seems like it works. So if you have that nested, just have the correct path there. Okay, cool. So got the gitignore. Good to remember that. What's something else I should probably do at this stage before I even start getting to coding or setting up my Django project? Anyone kind of think of one thing you might want?
Make a
You can
requirement
freeze your
on
one.
text file.
All right, I think I heard a couple people say it. Yep, good chance, good time to remember right now. So how do I make a requirements.txt file automatically, as in not me manually typing in entries into my requirements.txt? Don Kelly, how do I create a requirements.txt here? All right, not sure we have Don Kelly with us. Let's go to Andrew Whitford. Oh, Don, are you with us?
Yeah, a little problem on unmuting here.
All right.
The Python manage py make requirements.
Nope, that's a good guess because we usually use managed Pi for pretty much everything with Django. But this is kind of outside of the Django level. So any project you have, you can kind of create a list of requirements for that project. So this will involve pip. Do you remember how we do it with pip?
It would be. Oh, I was thinking about make migrations. That's why I was confused.
Yep. Yeah.
And so I would glance at my notes and find it in a minute, but somebody else is probably quicker.
That's all right. Yeah, so it's great that you have notes. Again, we don't expect you guys to memorize this, so you guys are free to use Google or whatever for your assessments and for your projects. So, but yeah, so the command we're looking for here is pip freeze. So that's, and you want to write that out to a file. So it's going to be called requirements.txt. Again, you can name this file whatever you want, but by kind of tradition or standard, we go with requirements.txt. So basically, pip freeze will capture all the libraries in your virtual environment and spit that out to a text file. If you don't have this, it'll just list out to your console. So we just did pip freeze. That's going to just list everything and not really save that anywhere. So if you actually want to save it, that's why we want to write it out to a file. So requirements.txt. All right, so it's going to create a new text file, and that should have the same output that you saw in your console.
Ankur, I'm sorry. So that the pip freeze requirements command, requirements.txt command basically takes everything you said in the virtual environment and converts it to that text file. Did I understand you correctly?
Yeah, so since we're in our virtual environment, it's gonna kind of inspect this folder and go through all the libraries here. and figure out which ones, to write out. So there's more folders and actual libraries. I'm not sure how it determines which ones to save. There's some information maybe that include, no, that's empty. I don't know the magic behind the scenes, so I'll claim ignorance there, but it just, it figures out what's in your virtual environment and writes that out to text file. So again, this is the key thing here is that we're in our virtual environment. If I create a new bash terminal that's not in my virtual environment and did a pip freeze, it's going to be a lot more libraries. So this is everything at my system level that's been installed. I probably don't need all this stuff. I might have made, accidentally installed stuff like Django Heroku. That's probably should be in my virtual environment instead of my system level. But so this is everything on my system since I'm not in my virtual environment. All right, cool. We don't need that terminal. Get rid of that. Let's clear this. All right, great. I think we're ready to go now. So we have our gitignore and requirements.txt. We have our project folder created. What's next in our usual steps of getting a Django project up and running? Andrew Whitford.
Okay, so then we have do the database.
Yep, we create a database, but I'm thinking of one step before that, maybe. I guess we create a database now, but so we have our project folder. What's something else we need to do?
Oh, the application folder.
Yep. So how do we create a new application folder?
Python manage.py start app.
Yep, you got it. Start app, and then we gotta give it an app name. So in this case, I'm gonna go with beer ratings app. Not really creative naming, but have an app folder. Might as well have a project folder, or we had a project folder, have an app folder that kind of matches. All right, so there's my app. All right, cool. So I have that. Again, some default files get created. Next up, I want to make sure we talk to everybody. Eric Berger. Now that we have our app folder, project folder, what's something we should do next?
Is this where we create the database?
We create the database, but I'm going to use the SQLite database. So actually, we don't need to manually create that SQLite database. It'll be automatically created for us. So so that's a good thought. If we're using Postgres, we need to create a database ourselves. But in the SQLite case, it'll just create a file for us. We'll see that in action. So good thought. Let's punt on that for now. Any other things that we want to do here? We create our app folder, which is something we normally want to do right after we create the app folder.
Go to your settings.
Yep, set settings. And then when you create an app or create multiple apps, make sure you add it to your installed apps section inside your project settings. So I'm going to do that now before I forget. If you try to run your project, eventually you run into an issue saying, hey, I have no idea what app you're talking about. So beer ratings app is my app name. And then we talked about database. So investigate your database section, make sure you know what database you're working with. So in this case, notice we're using SQLite. So that is what I'm going to opt with. That's the default. We're not using Postgres in my example here. You want to give your database name, and the default is db.sqlite3. I might change it to like my_db, or it's called beer db, whatever you want to call it. Essentially, this is a glorified text file that acts like a database, lets you kind of query it and do normal database activities, but it's going to create a text file or I guess SQLite file for you. So if I save this, now I have my database kind of will be created for me. I have my apps ready to go. Let's get into creating some models here. All right, so for my models, let's think about this.
Does it matter if it's a double quotes or single quotes when I install apps?
It does not. So great question for resettings. I just by habit, I don't know why, I don't have a rhyme or reason for it. I prefer double quotes when possible. And in most cases, double quotes and single quotes are interchangeable. As we recall from SQL week, writing SQL, that is one exception to that general rule, that where single quotes, you must use single quotes for SQL strings versus double quotes has a different meaning. But in this case, double quotes works. And then I guess my only personal preference here is that anything with double quotes, I can kind of look at my settings file and say, okay, I added that versus anything in single quotes. I kind of just automatically think, all right, Django added that by default. So in case I need to know like, hey, maybe I messed something up, I can easily spot what I added. I don't know if that's a justification for double quotes, but not really. I just by habit go for double quotes. But yeah, in this case, it does not matter if you use single quotes or double quotes.
That's a good practice too, as well.
I
Appreciate
mean,
that.
yeah, great question. Yeah, but you guys have your own ways of doing things, so don't let me corrupt any processes you guys have. But all right, so I have that settings file set up. We're going to create some models. All right, so let's kind of scan our README, make sure we know what we're doing. So log
Hey,
in.
Anchor, back on that settings.py, do we need a comma after that, the app name?
Good question. So we do not need a comma. You might want to have one just as a safety. So basically this is a list. So each entry has to be separated by a comma. The final comma is optional, not required. It's good practice, I guess, because if you add another item, so new app, whatever I want to call it, if I don't have this comma, it's very easy to forget it when I add a new item. So in this case, I'll get some error because this won't be processed correctly. So that's up to you. You don't have to have it there, but probably good practice that add a comma doesn't hurt in any manner. Good question. Okay, so any other questions on the settings file? Okay, let's look at our README. We have login, log out. I'm gonna actually skip on that right now. I want to get to the models because that's the more interesting part, and then we can get to CRUDing. I think we come back to login, log out maybe later. Okay, let's go with making models. So we need to create two models. It says beer and review. So I'll follow their suggestions and go back to my models. Again, if you guys have any questions, stop me along the way, but we're gonna create a model called beer that needs to inherit from models.model. And then beer. A beer probably has a name. So we'll go with models.charfield. Max length. I'm going to assume a beer won't be named longer than 64 characters. Any other beer specific items we could add? I'm not a beer drinker myself, so I don't really know, but is there any like beer metrics or like color or taste or anything that is common enough that
APB?
What was it?
APB?
APB, that's alcohol percent something?
Was ABV.
AB.
Alcohol by volume.
ABV. LOL.
Is that it?
Jack, we need you to chime in on this one.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's ABV.
Okay,
It's
so-
alcohol by volume. It would be a decimal, so something like 3.5 to like 10.2 kind of.
Sounds like it's decimal field. Thanks for that.
100.
All right.
That's
so
Everclear. Well, actually, you can't get there. Never mind. I'll shut up.
anything else? Might add a description in case we want to have some more detail on this. So we'll make models, char fields.
Might be worthwhile to have a style.
Max length. Let's say description can be up to 128 characters. What was that style?
Yeah, like IPA or porter style.
Okay.
Like it's kind of a broad category that a beer fits.
Okay, there's a few ways to go about this. I don't want to get too complicated here, but when you do have, I think Jack was hinting at this, there's a few maybe select styles. So like your styles might be what IPA or stout or maybe some other
blonde, lager. Yeah.
Gotcha. Normally you don't want to use a char field just straight up because that allows the user to enter anything in there. That may or may not make sense. In this case, I'm just going to go with char field. There are other ways to handle this. Like one way is to use choices.
Orchid.
So there's something called models that choices that lets you text choices. I think it's probably what we want. So in this case, you can kind of pre-program selections that the user can make. So if they're adding a new beer, they can only select from a predefined list. So whatever it might be, stout, IPA, lager, and if you don't want the user to add a new type, this is the preferred way to go about it, where you have a predefined choices list. For now, I'm just going to go with char field. We could change that later if we have time. I just don't want to introduce too many new concepts. So we'll keep it like this. So we have name, description, a decimal field for the alcohol content, and then the style, which is just lager, IPA, or whatever it may be. All right. For now, that's going to be good enough for my beer model. Then we have reviews. View, models, model. All right, here, reviews probably has some content, so we'll go with contents, models dot chart field. Question for who I am chatted with this morning. Let's go with Tim Gaston. How do I actually kind of relate a review to a beer? Are they related at all? And if so, how do I actually make that connection with my models here?
I would assume the review will be, you can put reviews on many different beers. So wouldn't it be one to many?
Yep, it is a one-to-many relationship in that one review is going to be tied to one beer, but one beer can have many different reviews. One review won't be shared across multiple beers, so that in this case, yep, a one-to-many is correct. It is not a many-to-many or a one-to-one. I'm going to make this a text field, so it's kind of open-ended. How do I actually make that connection? So Tim, yep, you gave a great answer there. Let's ask Jeremiah. How do I actually create this one-to-many relationship with my models here?
You hear me?
Yep.
You're gonna add the foreign key to it, so.
Yep. So foreign key is what we use for one-to-many relationships. In this case, we're gonna have a beer entry here, and then that's gonna tie to the beer model. A couple things you normally want to do. Related name is optional. So if you don't provide a related name, Django has a method to create a field for you. So I think it's gonna be like review set or something like that. But I think it's just easier to create my own name for that association. So I'm going to call this reviews. Again, just to highlight the way I think about this name is essentially a new magical field that will be available to you from any beer instance that you have. So notice I don't have a field. I do not have a field called reviews here, which is fine. This relationship will give me access to something called reviews on any beer object, which will tie in every review that's associated with that beer. So that's what this related name field is doing, is give me a field that I named called reviews. Again, if you leave this off, you still have access to that relationship. It's just, you got to go through the Django specific name, which in that case, I think it's like review _ set from your beer object. With a foreign key relationship, you do need to specify an on delete method. So if your beer model record gets deleted, how do you handle the associated reviews? In this case, I'm just going to want to delete them all. So this will cascade down. Cascade models.cascade. All right, so that's content beer, and then we probably have a reviewer. So I'm going to add reviewer as a field, reviewer, and that's going to be also a foreign key. Foreign key.
Anchor,
Wouldn't
it be models.foreign key?
Yes. Good catch. Yep, models.foreign key. Else it wouldn't know what a foreign key
You
is.
have it imported at the top though.
Yeah, I think it automatically imported it for me. So VS Code is trying to be helpful. So I'm actually gonna get rid of that. Let's keep models. But yeah, I think VS Code was like, all right, you tried using something. Let me try to guess where you're importing from. But yeah, usually you can just do it off the models import. So models.foreign key. Thank you for catching that. We need models down here too. This can be tied to a user. So we haven't talked about this too much. You have an option to either use the built-in user model, or you can even extend that. So if you want to add more fields, so the default user object has, username, email, first name, last name, maybe a couple other items in there. If you want to store more items with that user, there's a way to do it. So actually, if you do it with Google, Django extend user model, there are, I think, several different ways to do it. So I'm not sure if this page will do it. I've seen other examples of it. So let's look at Stack Overflow, always a good resource. Extending user model. All right, so here's an example. You one-to-one user. Employee. Okay, so there's something called base user admin, and then I think you could add in more fields. So again, yeah, there's a few ways to do it. You could extend the user model. You could substitute your own user model. So instead of using anything they create, you could create your own user model, and then you would have to tie that to the user admin. So that just tells that, hey, your admin panel, use your specific user that you are created instead of using the default one, which is like, Django contrib auth.models, I think. So there's a few ways to go about it. I'm not going to go over that right now because that's not vital to what we're doing right now. I'm just going to use a built-in user model, but again, just know that you can create your own user model. You're not stuck with Django built-in model. All right, so I'm going to use the built-in user model. That comes from Django.contrib.auth.models import user. All right, so that's the built-in user model. Again, you can use your own. It's a little more, a few more steps to use your own user model. In this case, I don't need anything too specific. I just want a username. So user works for me. Related name will also be reviews. I know this question was asked before. You can use the same related name for multiple foreign keys because effectively this field is being added to the model you're relating to. So in this case, user is going to have something called reviews and beer is going to have something called reviews. Those aren't going to conflict because they're in separate models, as in the related name field. On delete, we'll do the same thing, models.cascade. These tooltips popping up. Okay, so that's my review model. Anyone have any other thoughts what we could add for the review? We could have content, beer, maybe like a rating. So let's have rating can be a decimal value or integer value. Models.integer choices. Can I do this? I will try to do integer choices quickly. So integer choices, Django should be straightforward. Integer choices. All right, how to do integer choices. So it looks like I have a class, I have a nested class, and then do something like this. Okay, that looks simple enough, so I'm going to go with that. So I have my class here. I'm going to create a new nested class. Let's call this rating. Models on integer choice. We'll say terrible. Decent. Okay. What else? Good. And excellent. All right, so it's going to be a 1 through 5 scale. These values don't really matter much. I can use them within my code, but the user is just going to expect to enter a 1, 2, 3, or 4. All right, so I have my choices, and then all I got to do is choices equals rating. All right, so sort of a new concept. You guys can read documentation, but my goal here is to limit the user to enter a 1 through 5. Like I don't want them to enter a 7. This is like entering, stars on an Amazon review. Same thing there. So they'll choose 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm using integer field, not choices down here. So that integer field will be limited to the choices I specified. So you could do a similar thing with, as I mentioned, for your style. If you want to get with that, but I don't want to do that right now because I'm not sure if I'll break it. All right, so we have our ratings, and then we have choices that the user can select. Before I forget, because I always seem to forget, let's add a done string method so that when we represent this appropriately, we could see something useful. So in this case, I'll return an f string for self.name, and maybe from that with here. And for my review, I'll do the same thing. Let's have a done string method. F string, and this will be, let's just say reviewer. Now let's have review and self.content. Hopefully that's not too long. For self.beer. Okay, so that's my done string methods. Again, that just makes it a more human readable object when it's displayed by Django rather than something that's generic. So okay, I think I'm happy with my models here. Who's next? So Thomas Vernson, how do I actually get these models I created in my code to like my database?
I had a question before that.
Sure. What's up, Sarah?
At the end, actually, let me unmute so I don't have to hold space. At the and integer field choices equal reading dot choices.
Mhm.
What's that syntax reading dot choices? Like, where did that choices come from?
Great question. So this will again be a lot back to reading a lot of documentation, but I'm assuming here again I would need to 100% verify, but we're inheriting from another class here. So integer choices is what's providing this dot choices. So you're right that my class of rating has no no member called choices, right? I don't have something called choices here. That's going to be coming from integer choices. So I don't know if we can actually deep dive into it. So integer choices. So yep, if you look at integer choices, that inherits from two items. Integer inherits from integer or int, type int, but also something called choices. If I go deeper into that, right? So I'm looking at choices that has an enum and choices meta. Again, I'm not sure how deep this goes. All right, so choices meta has something called choices on it. So that's where choice is coming from. So there's multiple levels of classes beneath what we're actually seeing. But this is all Django, the whole point of Django is that they have all this, logic coded up for you so that you don't have to kind of reinvent the wheel. So yep, that's where it's coming from. Again, it's like 3 or 4 levels down. We also have access to something called labels, values, so that gives us access to, if we want to see only the values, we could probably do a dot values on rating to kind of iterate through those. But yeah, good question there. So dot choices, that's what inheritance is offering for us.
It just threw me off because yours was called choices too.
Oh, what do you mean? Right here?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so this is a field value I'm setting. So I'm actually doing this by a keyword. So quargs, integer field can take in choices. So if you pop that up, there's a whole list of parameters you can take. So I'm targeting the choices that I want to limit it to. Okay. Any other questions? All right, I'm going to proceed here. So I'm not sure if Thomas, are you with us by any chance? All right, Thomas might be away. John McIntosh, can you tell me how I can actually get these models into my database? All right, John might not be with us either. Stephen, you're next up on my list. Can you help me get these models into my database?
Don't you do the I believe it's the Python manage and make migration or something like that?
Yep, you got it. Make migrations plural with an S. So if I run that, it's going to run through my app, but also run through anything that Django wants to add to my database, which it always does. So, must define a decimal places. Good to know. So we have decimal field, decimal places. Let's only go down to 2 decimal places, and then also need max digits. I'm not sure what that is, but let's go with 4. Oh, I think that's probably ahead of the decimal points. I think 100% is probably the highest, or you can even get higher than 100%, right? 200.
Have you done URLs yet?
I have not done my URLs, but to push to my database, I do not need to update my URLs. But that is our next step after we get our database up and running. So let me try running make migrations again. All right, cool. So we got our script created. So if I go to my app folder, migrations, there's a script created here that Django is going to use. But now I actually want to run that script on my database. So who's left here? Tylin, are you with us?
Yes.
Hey,
Python manage migrate.
Yep, you got it. Python manage.py migrate. That's going to actually apply those changes to my database. So a whole list of items got added. Let me clear this. And okay, I think we're good to go. So our database should be up and running. The one thing I want to point out, so if you're using SQLite, it'll create a file here. So I have a beer db SQLite. Notice that I can't really inspect it just through VS Code. But essentially, as I mentioned, this is a database. So if I want to query it, I could get into SQLite to do my application. So I'm going to type SQLite 3 and my database name. So beer underscore db.SQLite 3. All right, so notice I'm in my SQLite application now, just like when you type pSQL to get into Postgres, I did that with SQLite 3. Now you can do the same things as before. So, let's say I want to insert a user or insert a beer. Let's go insert into Now you gotta remember your table names. So if you don't remember your tables, the syntax is a little different. So this can be your Google adventure. But if you type dot tables, you will see all the tables in your database here. So let me get out of here. Let me just get some space here. Dot tables. All right, so these are tables that exist in my SQLite database. I want to add something to beer ratings underscore app underscore beer. So let's do insert. So we're writing raw SQL here. I know we haven't done this recently, but you guys remember ratings app beer, the values. I will need to specify an ID. Let's go with someone name a beer, please.
Budweiser.
Budweiser. Hopefully I spelled that correctly. What other fields do we have? We had description. This is the king of beers, allegedly. King of beers, according to their marketing. Anyone know the volume percent, or should I just make it up?
4.8.
Thanks for did you know that offhand, or did you look it up, Jack?
They had a lawsuit about it. It's supposed to be 4.8. They were selling out like 4.4. You can be plus or minus 0.2 is the federal requirement.
Gotcha. Does anyone know the type of beer? Is it just beer, or is there
Pilsner?
Pilsner. All right.
PILSENE. There's that N. Yeah.
All right. Glad to have a beer expert on hand. All right. So those are the values I want to enter. Again, I'm just kind of matching up the fields here. Let's try to run that. Okay. So no errors should be good. So now if I want to actually get those values out, we do a select statement, select star from beer. Beer ratings app beer. And I forgot my semicolon. There we go. We got our entry. So we only have one entry, so we only see one Budweiser King of Beers 4.8 and Pilsner. Okay, so again, SQLite, pretty similar to using Postgres. The key thing is, so we're going to suggest, just to reiterate, we're going to suggest that you guys use SQLite for your assessment 4, just because when you commit this, you can just commit this entire file. It's not too large of a file. Just commit it up to your GitHub. So when we check out your assessments, we can kind of just run using your seed data. The alternative would be use Django fixtures, which we have talked about before, to seed your database, so that if you create a fixtures folder, we can run that for your Postgres database and have the same seed data you want. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to use the same seed data that you're using. I will say it's not a requirement. So if you just don't want to use SQLite or aren't comfortable with it, and you don't want to do Django fixtures, that's okay for the assessment. Tom and I will just create our own data. It takes a little more effort on our part. So again, we recommend using SQLite, but not end of the world either way. So that's our SQLite dive. Let's get out of here. How do I actually get out of SQLite? \Q. Nope. Control C, Control D. All right, Control D is the answer to that. So I'm out of SQLite. Okay, let's actually get to our front end, because we spent some time on our models. All right, so I think someone suggested, I forget who, but we need to work on our URLs. So to do that, first I'm going to go to my project URLs and create a new path. But before I do that, I need to include something called include. I'm going to use that for my path here. I guess my base is going to be beer / and actually let's call that beer ratings. And we're going to include something from our app. So that's going to be the name of our app, which is beer ratings app, and then .urls. So we're going to create a file called urls.py. So that's how we kind of point. Basically, when Django goes to route your or handle your routes, it's going to go to this file first, and then you can basically branch out to other URL files. That's what we're doing here. So beer ratings app URLs, that's a file we need to create. So I'm going to go to my app folder, create a file called urls.py. Here, I want to have something similar. So where'd you go? Drop this here. So my app URLs, I'm going to create some items here. So I don't need this admin item. Path, include beer ratings, don't need this. Don't need include. All right, so let's create some paths here. Views.index is usually my homepage, so call that such. What else? Path of beer Actually, I'm gonna change my mind. Sorry for doing this again. I'm gonna go with beer. All right, URLs. We're gonna have an int for beer ID. That'll be a path. So views dot. So my detail page, views dot beer detail. I'll name that appropriately. Name equals beer detail. All right, without getting too further into it, I want to just get these pages up and running. So one thing I need to do here is import the views from my beer ratings app. Beer ratings app, import views. Okay, so let's work on the home page, which would be a list of beers and a beer detail page. All right, so views. Views has nothing in it. Let's create those handlers. So we'd be doing index, since that's what I called it. Requests, object, and then right now put a pass in there. Then we also had beer detail. That takes in a request object, but also it takes in beer ID. Let's ask the audience, James White, where is this beer ID name coming from?
Sorry, can you say that one more time?
Sure. I have a handler of beer detail that takes in a request object. So that's the HTTP request that the user is sending. But also I have something called beer ID here. Where is this value coming from, and where is this name coming from of beer ID?
I just thought.
It's like a key from somewhere, right?
Yep, it is coming from somewhere. So that it's coming from our URL. So since we called it beer ID here, that is the actual value and the name that's going to be passed here. So if I name this, beers ID with an S, that's going to break because we're expecting beer ID. We're capturing a value as beer ID from the URL. So just make sure that the name in your URL path matches exactly what your variable name is for your handler. So in this case, beer ID is what I'm going with. So that's where it's coming from, and that's the value I'm going to get. All right, so I have index and beer detail. Let's actually write some templates for this. So I'm going to go to my app folder, create a new folder called templates, because by default, Django is going to look for a templates folder. If you wanted to look in other places, you need to adjust your settings file, but we'll go with the default. So templates, in here I'll call pages, and then maybe another folder called beers, or beer. Sure.
Do you mind if we take a break soon? I'm
Yep,
losing
absolutely.
you.
Yeah, we started at 10:15, so yeah, let's take a break. So we'll probably get another half an hour and then get to your assessments. So yeah, absolutely, great chance to take a break. Let's take a 10-minute break. I don't think we're pressed for time because you guys have the entire weekend to work on assessment. So we'll definitely try to get your assessments before lunch. But let's take a 10-minute break. Be back at 11:10, and we'll make sure we get some front end stuff going here. We might not complete the entire review, but we'll get as far as we can. All right, so we had left off by we created our URLs. We want to actually give something to render. So I was creating my templates for my items here. So I created a beer folder under pages templates. So let's create a file here. Let's call it beer lists.html. Before I get into that, I'm just going to create a base template. Usually it makes it much easier to create these pages. So let me create a base.html. Again, you can name your base file whatever you want to. Make sure that's under my templates. All right. This is going to be just a general HTML file I'm going to create quickly. So get all the stuff out of the way. I want some blocks here. So we'll go with, what is it? Main content, as I always call it. Make sure you end your blocks, end block. All right.
You need a block up there.
Yep, thank you. Block. I'll do the same for title. And you can create as many blocks as you want, so you're not really limited. Just gonna make sure they have unique names, else you'll get into more trouble. Block page contents, page title. All right, good to go. So that's my base, simple enough to create that. Going back to my beer list, I want to extend that template. So I'm gonna do extends with an S. the name of that template, so base.html, percent sign, and then had a couple blocks. So let me just copy what I had before. So I had page title as one of my blocks.
Hey, Anka, quick question.
Go for
So I noticed that when you hit enter on your extend space HTML or remove the curly braces, why does it do that? 'Cause it's happening to me too.
Yeah, I think that's a VS Code thing. I think someone had posted in our Slack channel about this, and I think
Yeah, that was me, and Jack's solution solved it, but it took off the linter for all of the other HTML stuff, so it doesn't, like, it took
My
that
Django
and-
linting is messed up as well because like it catches Django, but I'm not getting like into the autocomplete brackets and stuff. I just deal with it. But
we can take it offline. I'll
yeah, I think that might be a Google question. I don't have an answer. I think that's just VS Code doing whatever formatting. It's like, all right, you don't need those brackets, so it'll drop it for you. I think it's VS Code, obviously. So there probably is a way to customize that so you can tell it, hey, don't do this, and also don't screw up my linting. But yeah, that's going to be a Google exercise for anyone dealing with that. I've noticed that also. I feel like I didn't have to deal with that before, so I don't know if that's like a new formatting feature, but yeah, it is slightly annoying. I've just put up with it without finding a solution. But good question. I do want to find a solution. If anyone finds a great solution that doesn't screw up the linting, I'd be interested. Okay, but yeah, let's kind of quickly get this going. So this is my beer list. So let's just say beer list as my title. And let's quickly add something here. So let's say all beers go here. This is going to be, usually you want to use a list when you're listing out items, right? It's going to make sense to use a HTML list for that. So we're going to have a bunch of list items. This is going to be generated dynamically. So we're going to have a for loop that's going to go in beers. Let's call that maybe all beers. Okay, so for each beer, we want to show the beer name usually, and then we usually want to link that to a beer detail page. So I'm going to do that since we are going to create that route also. Beer name, and then href. Again, usually you want to, with Django, you want to use relative paths instead of kind of hard coding those paths. So we're going to go with that. The way we do that is have your percent curly braces inside of a string, because the href needs to be a string. And then inside of that, that's going to be URL, and then the name of your path. In this case, the single quotes and double quotes do matter because you can't use both nested within each other. It's not going to know how to parse that. So in this case, internally, I'll use single quotes, and this would be the name of my route. So I think my route name was beer detail, and this will take in a beer ID. So b.id will that be that beer ID. Okay, so that's going to be my link. That's going to be my display. And I need to end my for loop. And don't forget to end your for blocks or your if blocks. All right, list item. I'm going to save that. Go back to creating another template file. We're going to call this beer detail.html. And here I want to do something. Okay, beer detail, it's gonna be very similar to beer list in terms of the sections I want. So here, let's add beer.name as the title, detail. All right, if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask. I wanna make sure everyone understands what I'm doing. So I'm gonna pass in some object called beer. I'm gonna show the name. In this case, I don't want a list, I just want a detail. So let's go with an H3, sounds good to me. We have a description. That's beer.description. Okay, what else do we had? We had alcohol content, so we'll do alcohol by volume. And that'll be simple enough, beer.abv. And the last thing was type. That as another paragraph tag beer dot type. All right, cool. I think we're good to go there. What else? I'm gonna save that. Let's actually see if this works. I don't want to get too far into it. If I have something screwed up, I definitely want to check that. So let's see. We have our templates, I think, ready to go. We need to go back to our views. Right now, I have not added anything here. So let's actually render some of our templates. So request objects, the first parameter. Second parameter is the template name. So in this case, it's nested under pages, beer list.html is, I believe, what I called it. In this case, I need to pass it a data dictionary. Again, you can name this whatever you want. So I think I always go with data. Let me just name it something else. Let's say info. So to make it clear, you could call it whatever you want to. So info is going to be all beers, I believe is what I called it in my template file. Again, you need to make sure the names match. So it is kind of fragile in that Django won't catch the error up front, but it will catch it when it's trying to run render your templates. So look at my beer list. I called something all beers. So that's the name I need to match. So all beers is what I call it here. And that will be, let me ask the audience or ask a member, who I haven't talked to. Alex Saunders, can you tell me what actually goes into my all beers value here? So my key is all beers. What's my value going to be?
Let me think. Would it be what you called in the for loop in your HTML file?
It might be.
When you did your for loop, so would it be B or would it be something different?
It would be something different. So this B is just a variable name. That's going to be each beer that's stored in this all beers object, or I guess data structure. But how do I actually pass like all the beers in my database to this file here? So how do I get a list of all the beers from the database that exists in my database?
Are you gonna have to call something from your models file? I'm not sure, honestly.
You're on the right track.
Dot objects or something.
Yep, you guys, I think you guys have the right idea. So I need to import my models. So my app is called Beer Ratings App. For my models, I want to import beer. And since I'm at it, probably gonna wanna use review model eventually. So beer, and now once we have access to the model, we call beer.objects.all. And that's essentially doing a query on a database. It's doing a select star from, what is it? Beer ratings app beers. That's a table name in our database. And it's just doing a select star and returning that as a query set. So query set is a Python object similar to a list that is basically the result of that query. All right, so we get all beers, and then we want to pass that in our info dictionary. So assuming everything works correctly, I think our page should render. Likewise for our beer detail, we want to do something very similar. So I'm going to copy my render. We want to render the detail page. We want to pass it some info, but instead of passing all beers, how do we actually pass it the beer that we want? So I think I talked to everyone looking at the list. Anyone I haven't talked to this morning that wants to help me out here? Jung, I don't think I've talked to Jung. How do I pass a specific beer to this page here? Jung, are you with us?
He's typing in chat.
Okay. Beer equals, all right, I'll follow along. Beer. All right, so what goes here, Jung? Yep, so it's coming from Jung, so beer.objects.get. And then how do I actually get the particular beer? ID. Yep, all right, so I think Jung has it correct. So we have a beer ID that's going to be passed from the URL. We're going to capture the ID, and that's going to be passed as a value to this handler. We want to use that beer ID and call .get and match the ID with the beer ID. Just for full information, you can use ID here, or you can use PK. PK means primary key. So each of these models obviously is keyed by the ID. So you could use PK or ID. Either one gives you the same thing. So we'll use ID here. Thank you, Jung. All right, so we get the particular beer. I usually like to do a try catch or try accept, just in case like the user entered something malicious or accidentally entered something. So I'm going to copy this here, create a beer objects. So assuming they pass a valid beer, we'll get through this try except, but if they, try to enter a beer ID of like 99 and we don't have a beer ID of 99, we want to handle it and maybe return. Let's just go with HTTP response. That's easiest for me. And we'll say that's a beer with ID. Beer ID doesn't exist.
That's not a beer at all.
Yep. Okay, so that's good. And then here will be beer. I need to include HTTP response. So that's from Django.http import HTTP response. All right, cool. So I think that looks good to me. Let's actually test it out. So we've coded a lot. We probably should have been testing incrementally. Let's get our server running. Let's just call him, might have double upon some people since I think I've talked to most people. Mark Stanley, how do I actually get my project running? Like, how do I actually check out my pages?
You got a Python manage py run server.
Yep. So that's actually what will kick off your server. So manage py run server. Hopefully I don't have my 8,000 port in play. We'll see. All right, cool. So the default port is 8,000. So that's where my server is running. Localhost 8,000. So now that it's up, let me bring up a browser window so we actually see something for all of our hard work here. Let me toss that over here. Make that a little bigger. And let's go to localhost. All right, so we go to the base localhost 8,000, and it's saying, hey, you need to go to one of these paths. So let's go to /beer. Okay, notice we get all beers, and then we get Budweiser, because that's the only beer in our database right now. If I click on it, hopefully get to the detail page. Let's click on it. All right, there we go. So we got Budweiser, King of Beers, alcohol by volume, type. Type seems to be screwed up, so let me double check my code quickly. Beer lists, beer detail, beer.type, our model as style. So that's where I went wrong. So I guess that's not an error. Django's just gonna be like, I don't have any value stored in dot type. So that's gonna be what happened there. So if I go back to here, change that to style. Or let's make that style too. Sorry for the background noise. I have a noisy street here. Okay, let's save that. Let's see if that fixes it. All right, there we go. Style is closing. Great. So it looks like our detail page is working. Our homepage should be working. I'm gonna take a quick detour and kind of get my admin panel running. So a couple steps for that. Hopefully you guys remember. So first thing I want to do is create a super user. So I'm going to do python manage.py, create super user, all one word. And this basically is just going to be an admin level user that has access to everything in my system for my Django project. So there, I'll go with admin, no email, admin. Yep, don't care about security. All right, so I created my super user pretty quickly. One other thing I need to do is actually register my models so that I can create my create and view my items on my admin panel. Easy to forget. So if I went to my admin panel right now, let's check that out. I can log in with my super user. Notice by default, the only two things you have access to are groups and users. Users are the Django user models that we're going to be using. Groups are for permissioning and authorization, which we talked about on Wednesday. Not going to deal with that right now. So I need access to my models here. Let me ask the audience, Jonas, how do I actually see my models here? How do I get my models to show up here?
I think you have to do something with your URLs, if I'm not mistaken.
Close. So you want to do something with your admin.py file. So if you go to your app folder, there should be an admin.py file already created for you. So it's here. Yep. You need to register your models here. So from my beer ratings app, .models, imports beer and reviews, since I want to create some seed data from my reviews. Then you need to register them. So the command for that is admin sites.register. And here I want to register beer. And likewise, I want to register reviews. So if I do that, and I did everything else correctly, if I save that, my server should reboot. I think that's good to go. I'm going to refresh this page, and voila, I got beers and reviews. So if I go to my beers, I should see the Budweiser item I entered. but let's add a few more just to have more data. Someone give me some beers, please, or beer names.
Sierra Nevada Pale Ale.
What?
I don't even know how to spell that.
Sierra Nevada.
Nevada. Description. This is some beer I've never heard of. Style, I assume, is an IPA. You said
It's a pale ale.
pale ale. I'm the last person you want to ask about beer advice. I don't drink pale ale.
5.5.
5, you said? All right. 5 on those. Let's save that. Let's get one more here. So someone else want to shout out a beer?
Corona.
Corona.
Coronavirus.
Not a virus, we promise. All right. Anyone know the alcohol by volume? All right, let's make one up. So let's go with 3.31. 3.13. I don't know if that's how precise to get. And then style. Anyone know the style of this? We'll just go with something.
I know it's piss water.
All right, I'll just call it something. I'm gonna
Pale lager.
Pale lager, right? Do you know that's baseball lager like that?
LAGER. LA.
LA. Oh, sorry, gotcha. Okay.
1G.
And the alcohol is 4.5-ish.
Okay. Well, thanks for fact checking me. All right. So again, in this case, we went with the ability for the user to enter anything they want. So again, we're not limiting them by choices, but if we wanted to, we could do that through the Django like text choices. We can maybe change that later. Let's save this. All right, we got 3 beers. Let's actually do some reviews. So let's pick a beer. Let's review Budweiser. Eric Berger, what are your thoughts on Budweiser?
Someone who lives right down the street from the Budweiser brewery, it's absolutely terrible.
All right, I'll get back to you in 1 second. We need to create some users. I'm gonna actually create some users quickly. So let's create Eric B will be our user. Password 123. They won't let us have crap passwords. All right, let's go with Oscar Eric. Hopefully that lets me do it. Oscar Eric. Save. Oh, all right. This is the username. We'll call it Eric B. Password Oscar Eric. Oscar Eric. Hopefully that works. Fingers crossed. Cool. All right. So we get Eric B as our user. Let's go back to reviews. Add a review. Add review. Eric, what'd you say? This is
absolutely terrible.
So it's kind of harsh there for the king of beers. Absolutely terrible. Okay, that was Eric's review. For Budweiser reviewer, we have Eric B. Rating of terrible, decent, okay, good, or what do you want to go with? Terrible?
Terrible.
I assume terrible. All right, we save that. That's a review. Let's get another review for Budweiser. Who do I have on my screen? Who I haven't talked to recently? Reno, do you have a review for Budweiser?
Yeah, it's my go-to beer at the bar for just a cheap generic.
Go-to beer at the bar. All right. So that's Budweiser reviewer. We need a new reviewer. Let me create that quickly.
I love how divisive beer is.
Reno.
You got to get passionate about it. Right?
Oscar Reno. Oscar Reno. Save that. Probably had to refresh this page. It's not that dynamic. All right. My go-to beer. All right. We're running short on time, so I might kind of expedite this process. My go-to beer. Beer is Budweiser. Reviewer is Reno. Rating is, let's say, good. Save that. All right. So we have a couple of reviews. If we actually go to our, we don't have anything to show for that. So let's actually add those routes. So I'm going to skip the process of adding and editing a beer. I want to get to the nested part. So if I go to my URLs, let's add some nesting. So here, go to my path. Let's have a beer ID base, and then let's go with review. Let's go with all reviews. So beer ID and reviews will be our landing page for our review list. And that's gonna be review list as my handler. And then let's have a review detail page. So I know normally, like if I'm envisioning this as an actual site, all the reviews are probably shown with like their content. Like if you imagine like a post and comments, they're usually, all the comments are shown on one page. But just get more nesting going here. We'll have ints, and this is gonna be review ID. All right, so this is where we're getting to our nested CRUD. Don't forget your commas, that's why I'm having problems here. This needs to be a string, obviously. Not sure what I was thinking. All right, that's entire string. So beer ID, reviews, and then review ID will be review detail page. Detail, and then, all right, let's quickly get these going, and then we'll do some adding and updating for our nested items. I want to hopefully finish this by, let's say, 11:50. So that'll be my cutoff time so that we can hand off the assessment and answer any questions about the assessment. So what did I do here? I don't want this. All right, so we have these paths. So we have view review list. Let's go to views. Add this here. Define. This will take in a request object, as always. Request. Missing my shift keys. All right, request. But what else does review list take? So if you look at our URLs, review list takes in a beer ID. So each review list will be tied to one particular beer. So this will take in a beer ID. All right, here we want to do something similar to getting a beer. So we do that, return error. Otherwise, very similar process here. We get a beer, pass it as our info to our review list, is what we're calling it. All right, so I need to create a review list template. Let me do that in my templates file. Let me create a new folder called reviews. We call this beers. Not sure about my naming, but we'll go with that. So this is going to be reviews and review list. Actually, I'm going to change that back. I don't like the plural name. Should match my models. Let's go with beer. Sorry for the naming stuff. Kind of just being particular. All right, beer and beer's beer review. Okay, review list. This should take in a beer, and then we could show all the reviews based on that beer. How do we get access to all the reviews for this beer? Anyone know how?
Just be beer.reviews.all because reviews is the name you gave it in the foreign key.
You got it. So that was Sean with the answer. Great answer there. We could do beer.reviews because we have this related name field called reviews. So that should give us access to all the reviews tied to one particular beer. But in this case, we got to do a .all because it's a related relationship, so that whatever particulars of it, you got to do a .all on it. Just remember that. If you don't, you'll get probably some Django error. So I go to review, I need to create a new file. Let's call that review list.html. And so when I create new files, I'll create one more called review detail.html. Okay, these are going to be very similar to my beer list. I'm going to copy that for this. It's going to be review list for my title. We're going to have a beer here, and then reviews. Okay, so the beer is what we're going to pass in here. So that's going to be simply beer.name, double curly braces, not single. And then our reviews, as Sean mentioned, we should have access to that via beer.reviews, plural, because that's the name of the related, the foreign key relationship that we gave, and then all. All right, so if we do that, R is going to be our review. We just want to list out our review. Let's just say contents and link to that. So in this case, it's going to be review detail, and we're going to pass it a beer ID and a review ID. So I'm going to try that without names. I think if you order it correctly, it should capture it in the same order. If not, we'll need to specify what values we're actually tying these to. So we have beer ID and review ID. That's gonna be a list. All right, let's check this out. And then beer
Hey,
detail.
Ankur,
Yep.
is when back on the HTML page, is beer.reviews.all, is that a method call or is that a data parameter? Does it
not a
need
method.
does it need double parentheses at the end?
Good question. You do not need double parentheses. Actually, you should not have double parentheses. I don't think it's a method call. I think it's a property. But good question there. It is confusing because when you're typing in Python, you do like, beer.objects.all as a method call. In Jinja, it is, I think, passed as a property. So no parentheses needed there. But I will double check that by actually running this. So we have that. Good question. Let's do a beer review detail quickly. So I'm going to pass a review objects.
You also still had b.ed ID in the last one when you had beer is what you called it, I think.
Thank you. Yep, good catch there. I'm not sure what to put here, so let's do review detail. And then, so we're gonna have a review object, so review.beer.name. And then, what else do we want here? All right, let me just do this quickly. We'll have review is just review.contents is the name of the field, and that probably should be H1. Make that H3, and then we probably should have the reviewer listed. So we'll do H3 reviewer. Okay, let's leave that for now. Reviewer dot reviewer dot username. Any questions where these fields are coming from? All right, let's go with one more. Rating, I think, was one of it. Rating review dot rating. Okay, so keep in mind this is an integer field, not a text field. So we're going to see an integer value for rating 1 through 5. All right, let's say that. Hopefully I have everything correct. If I don't, we'll kind of debug base HTML. Okay, save that. Let's look at our views. All this should be good. We're passing a beer. We need to pass a detail. So we need beer detail. Or sorry, review detail. So that's going to be a little more involved because we look at our URLs. We're going to have two values. We're going to have review ID and beer ID. In this case, I usually don't use the beer ID because we can get that from the review. So if I do review detail, we have beer ID that's automatically captured. But in this case, I want review ID. And then I'll get the review from review objects.get. ID in this case is review ID. All right, and a review with review ID. Okay, cool. That should be good to go. Need to change review here because that's the value our template's using, and we're passing the review objects again. So we're not using the beer ID at all. It's kind of just there if we need it. In this case, review should give us info, and this is under review and review detail. Okay, let's check this out, see if it works. Can we go back to my admin panel? I think we're good there. All right, let's refresh. Go back to my homepage, which is /beer. Or /beer is my landing page. All right, so we have Budweiser, Sierra Nevada, Corona, or we added. I'm going to go to Budweiser since we have reviews for that. Click here. We don't have any link to our reviews. So that's what I need to add. So in our beer detail, let's say add a button. And let's say that button is going to be, that needs to be inside of a block.
Yep.
I think Jack was going to catch me on that. Good that you guys are catching these mistakes pretty quickly. It's good to see. HR, that's just dividing line, a button, that's going to be a link. So nest that in a tag. All right, so this button is going to be, let's say, view reviews. And this will be an href. Again, want to use relative paths. So it's going to be %, in curly braces, URL, and then the path for this is our review list. We need to pass it a beer ID, so beer.id. Okay. Again, just be familiar with that syntax for using relative links instead of hard-coded ones. If I save that, refresh my detail page. All right, cool. I click view reviews. Nothing happens. That's not good. Review list. Why would that not be linking to anything? Your detail. Do I need this on one line? Surprised if I do. Refresh. Still nothing.
It could be that you have both button and a link.
Ah, sorry. href should be in the a tag, not button tag. My bad. Sorry. href is an attribute for the anchor tag, not a button tag. So that link wasn't working. All right, cool. We're good now, I think. There we go. So we got to our reviews. Again, this is for Budweiser specifically. We have 2 reviews. Absolutely terrible. My go-to beer. Let's go here. All right. Eric B said, hey, this is absolutely terrible. Rating of 1. Let's check out my go-to beer. We got Reno. Give it a 4. All right, cool. We have that. Let's actually get to our adding and updating in the next 6 minutes. So I'm going to kind of go through that quickly, but stop me if you guys have any questions. So first thing I want to do is add a route for a review that I'm going to add. So if I go to review/new, that should add your ID review/new. That should be review. Call that new. Name is consistent, and then likewise, we're going to have something for editing, and might want one for deleting also. If we have time, we can do that. But I think deleting is pretty straightforward. But if you guys want to see that, please ask me. Call it update, review, update, and review update. Okay, let's quickly get these going. Go to my views. I'm going to create a handler for that. So we're going to do def review new. So this is going to be past request objects and beer ID. So we want to create a new review for a specific beer. And in that case, we want to return a render of some form. So this is where I'm going to create a model form because this makes it easier. So I'm going to create a new file called forms.py. Forms.py in my app folder. So in here, I'm going to create some model forms. So I'm going to import from Django.forms, import model form. And then I want from my models, which is beer ratings app.models, I want to import the appropriate models. So beer and review. And then I'm going to quickly create some model forms. So hopefully you guys are familiar with the syntax for it. Create a form name. So in this case, I'll go beer form. Inherit from model forms. So model form. Then you need a nested class called meta. Again, it must be called meta. You do not have a choice there. And you need to provide it 2 fields. The model you want to tie it to, in this case, it's going to be beer. And then what fields you want to expose to the user. So again, sometimes you might not want to expose every field. But if you do want to expose every field, you can do fields equals __ all. So they have access to edit all the fields. Again, sometimes you want to protect that. In this case, I'll go with all. Likewise, for my review field, I want to have a review model and expose all the fields. All right. So I have that. Now in my views, I want to import the form so I can use it. So from beer ratings app.forms, import those model forms. I can type import beer form and review form. All right, so we're working with review form in this case. So for my creating a new item, I want to create a review form. So let's call it form equals review form. And we have 2 cases. In the get request, we just want to show the form. So in this case, we'll render the request. Objects, what else? We need a template. So it's going to be probably under pages/review/ I don't know, review new.html. Okay, and then we want to pass some info. That info is going to contain this form. So info dictionary, again, can be called data, can be called whatever you want. Form be my value. I'll pass it to the form variable. All right, again, you can name this whatever you want. Just want to name it something sensible. Something's call it form, since that's essentially what I'm passing. So that's the get case. So let's look at the get case here. Yeah, let me show you maybe a couple of tricks, but let's go with this. Refresh, want to go to /new. So let's add a link for that on our reviews list page. So here I'm going to add a new button, HR, do this correctly this time. href will be %%. URL, the route we want to go to is review_new. And we want to pass it the beer ID. So we have access to beer ID. And then it's going to be a button. And that button will just say add review. Okay, given that, if we refresh this page, our server's down, server's still down, we might have an error. Looks like we forgot a comma. Yep, those commas are important. So add a comma to your list, maybe add a comma here so I don't forget next time. Review update doesn't exist, so Django is trying to be helpful, but in this case, I don't care for review update quite yet. Update takes in a review ID, and in this case, I'll leave that for now. Okay, so server should be happy now. Review lists. Did I do something wrong here? Not sure why that's not showing up. Review list.
By the way, what's that HR tag for?
HR is just a horizontal line. So this is add a divider. Yep. HR stands for horizontal rule, I believe, actually. So if I refresh that, there we go. So this line is just the HR element. All right, so did I do href? Okay, href is in the correct place this time. So we go to add review. We get template does not exist, review/new. So I need to create that template. Thank you, Django. So I do review_new.html. I want to create a template for that. So let's copy, add this, add review, will be the title of my page. And then here I need a form. So the form is the important part. Add review for, we have beer.name, because we're passing in a beer object and we want a form. So the form, important thing, you want to specify a method. Make sure it's method and not action or something else. So this is going to be a post when the user submits it. So the button will be type submit. This specifies that this button is responsible for submitting the form. So let's just say add review. And then we need to render our form. So we're passing in a form object. So my preferred way is using a table. You can use as P instead of as table if you want to. So form.as table. We'll render that in a table format. So let me save that. Let's see if this works. All right, there we go. Add review for, we can pass anything in here. Because if I go back to my views, we need to pass it a beer. Right, let's grab a beer from up here and do the same thing. Will that be nice? Come back, come back, come back. Syntax always matters. All right, there we go. Add review for Budweiser. One thing I want to show here, notice that we know we want to add a review for Budweiser, but we should be friendly to the user and probably pre-select that in our beer. Because right now they had to select where they're adding it, which they can add a review for Corona or Sierra Nevada, but the route that we're going through is through Budweiser. So how do we actually pre-populate this? There's a way you could do it inside the form. There's a value called initial. And inside of here, you could pass it what you want to initialize. In this case, we want beer to be initialized by beer. I think that should handle it. So if I save that, server seems good. Let's refresh. There we go. So this is pre-populated with that actual beer. Again, they can still change it. So if they want to add a review for something else, they can. But that allows you to kind of pre-populate fields with this initial variable for your form. All right, I know I'm past my cutoff time, but let me do the update case because that is important to cover, and then we'll get you to your assessment, I promise. Okay, so that's that. Let's actually process this form. So we need to handle the post case. So let's do if request that method. If that's posts, we want to do something a little different. We don't want to just show the form, we want to handle the data. So in this case, we want to do form.save, which will save it to a database, assuming there's no errors. So we probably want to do if form.fullClean. Remember, that's goes through all the validation, your validations, and the default Django validations for your model. Form.save. This should usually be wrapped in a try catch or try except. I always say try catch just because of JavaScript. Except return HTTP response. You failed. Keep it simple. Demoralize the user. Form.save. I need a form object. So that is this object here. Form. And then the way that I initialize it is you could pass in request.post or none. What this is actually doing is it's going to check this first value. If that is none by default, it's going to do the OR case. So anything that is none is evaluated to false. So in this case, if this is non-existent, it's going to be false. It's going to default to this, which is none. All right, so we get none, reform. All right, I think that should be good. Let's give this a try and see if it works. So refresh. All right, content. Let's add a review. Let's say I need to create another user. So create one more user. Who wants to review this? I see Sean Kernan, you're on my screen. So you're going to be forced to give a review here. Sean K, your password is Oscar Sean. Oscar Sean, save. Okay, cool.
Am I reviewing Budweiser?
You are reviewing Budweiser.
Tastes like water.
Tastes. Now, water can be a good thing.
My man.
Taste.
If I want water, I'll drink water. If I want beer, I want beer.
We're gonna give that. Just like
no, it's terrible. It's terrible.
No, we're gonna give decent. Sorry, water's decent at least. Water's not terrible. All right, at least it doesn't taste like poison. I feel like poison or like something bitter would be way worse than just water, neutral. All right, so add review, forbidden. Oh,
technically all alcohol is poison.
True. All right, looks like
It's all in the dose.
Very important step. Always good to keep it in mind. So Django saying, hey, you didn't include a token, which I naturally just forget because it's easy to forget. Always remember to add your CSRF token. CSRF token, just some security thing that Django kind of requires. So let's.
So that requires for forms?
Yep. For when you're submitting data to your server, you need to kind of have that security thing in there. Just take our word for it. I mean, you can read up more on CSRF verification, security online. So tastes like water. Let's do this quickly. Sean K, decent review. All right, so nothing happened here because I'm not redirecting anywhere. So I added review, didn't get that error message. So if I walk through my code, I'm hitting that save and actually rendered it again, actually. So that's probably not what I want to do. So in this case, I want to return a redirect. We haven't covered redirect too much, but I think we have used it before. Redirect, this will let you redirect to a new page. So if I go, where do I want to get here? I return redirect and then redirect to some route. So in this case, I want to redirect to, I think I could do it this way. URL. I'm not sure about this actually. Where we want to go to. Beer detail. And then that's going to be beer.cookie. I think that's what I want to do. Let's try this again. All right, tastes like water. Let's add the same review. That still didn't happen.
I don't think you need the URL, the reverse method. You just need to put the beer detail code.
Right,
there.
right. That sounds more familiar. And then we need to pass this value. I forget how to pass this.
Just you can use beer ID equals beer ID, beer.id.
Thank you, Musa. That is definitely something I forgot how to do. So this is going to be beer ID equals beer.id. Thanks, Musa. So yeah, redirect takes in the route name. So you don't have to do the the URL stuff that I was trying to do before. And then you can specify the field names. Thanks, Musa. Let's try this one more time. Refresh or add review. Still no. What's going on here? I bet I have a bunch of reviews saved. If I look at reviews, nope, that's not even going through. Anyone want to try to determine what's going on here? So form, initial, try. I'm not hitting this. I assume full clean is failing, so let me just get rid of that. Not sure what validation I might be failing. Let's try this. Okay. Refresh this, sure, continue. All right, so view reviews. All right, there we go. So it looks like full clean. I'm gonna need to debug this, figure out why that's not working. But yeah, so we save it and we add it. So let's add another review. Good. Let's say Sean Kernan had a change of heart and said it's good. Instead of updating it, we're just gonna add a new review. That's good. All right, so we got that review here. Probably should go to the review list instead of that. So review list is what we want to go to. So let's add another review. Amazing. Now, the Eric B changed his mind too. Everyone's warming up to Budweiser. There we go. So we have amazing added there. All right, so we're hitting noon. Does anyone want to see the update case? It's very similar. If anyone wants to see the update case, we could do it in probably 5 minutes. Speak your mind now.
Sounds good to me.
As in, you want to see the update case, Sarah?
Yeah, I don't mind spending a little extra time on this.
Okay.
Hey, Ankur.
Yep.
Can we release assessment 4, and then for those of you who want to continue going through it, we can definitely keep going.
Sounds great. Yep. So let's bookmark this. Let me pause the recording. All right. So the last couple things we want to do is the ability to update a review. So we have the ability to add, which we did here. We could add a review, but we want to actually update an existing review. So let's say, one of our reviewers want to change their reviews. They shouldn't have to add new reviews each time. So if I go back to my code, I have the handler for it, which is review update. That's going to be very similar to my create. So similar, in fact, I'm going to copy my create case or my new case and paste that in here. Make sure I update page to be, I guess I could use the same form. So rename my new to be review form, just to make sure I know what it actually is. So let's make form here and form here. All right, so I'm going to reuse the same template for my add and update case. The reason I'm doing this is because it's going to be the same form. We're just going to do something slightly different when we're updating or creating a new one. So in this case, we need a review ID because we're updating a particular review. So in this case, I'm going to grab a review instead of the beer. So review objects get review ID. All right, so we're just getting the review that they want to update, assuming it exists. Fix this. Okay, so assuming they have a valid review, we're not expecting our user trying to be malicious. We want to initialize, let's say, in this case, I'll do it instance equals review. All right, so we're going to have a review. We're going to pre-populate with that review so that when we get to the form, it should have all the values kind of pre-populated for our user. And that's done by this instance equals your object parameter.
So that doesn't have to be an object, a key value pair.
For your instance, no. Instance is just going to be the actual object, not a dictionary. But good question there. So if I have instance to review, I don't need that initial value like I had here, because the instance will have the beer there already. Okay, so I populate instance that should pre-populate my initial render of that review. And then I don't have this review equals review. Not sure if I even need this. Oh, I do need a beer. Sorry. Do review that beer, because if I'm looking at my review form, it uses beer name. So I do want to pass it a beer value, and I'll do that via the review.beer. All right, so since I'm using the same form, I'll make sure I'm good there. The redirect, so when I update a review, I would say, let's go to the review detail page since we have a review to show. So review detail, and that's going to be beer ID equals review.beer ID, and then the review ID is going to be simply enough review.id. That's the object we have up here. We grab review from the database. We have access to the beer ID through the review, and then the review ID obviously through the review object. Okay, otherwise this looks very similar. So similar, in fact, I probably want to condense this, but let me actually see if it works. If not, we need to fix it. All right, so let's go to absolutely terrible. Let's say Eric wants to update this. We should have an update button on our review detail page. So let's actually go about doing that. Review detail, let's add a button. I like having HRs here, and that should be in your block sections, HR. And then we want a button that says updates, and then maybe a button that also says deletes. Deletes. All right, so update that href will be curly braces, and then this will be URL. Sorry, so we nested within a string. All right, so href, always put it within a string. Then you want to inject some Python in here. So that's going to be curly brace %, URL, and then the name of the route you want to go to. So in this case, we want to go to review_update. I think that's what I called my route. I need to double check that. Then we need to pass the IDs. So review.beer.id and review.id. Why do we need to specify both? Well, if you look at our handler for review update is over here. It requires a beer ID and review ID. Even though we're not using the beer ID inside of our logic here, our route is saying, hey, we're capturing both a beer ID and a review ID with our update, right? So review update here. Let's check that out. All right, server seems good. Let's refresh the beer detail page. All right, we have update and deletes. Looks like I screwed something up there. Not sure. Oh, is that it? No. Not sure why there's a link in between here, but I'm going to ignore that. Sorry. I'm not sure what that link is for. Oh, it must be, I know what it's for. So I put a new line here. Let me get rid of that new line. Save. Refresh. All right, cool. So I click update. That should hopefully take me to the same form that I saw for the create. All right, notice I need to update my text here. So that's incorrect, but notice that the values have been filled out. That's because we provide that instance. So, you know, I can know what to update. I don't have to retype everything I had before. So let's say, you know, Eric wants to amend this saying absolutely terrible, but I don't hate it. I don't know if that makes sense. So let's say he upgrades it to decent. So we update those values, keep everything else the same that we don't want to change. By, again, let's just read update review instead of add review. Let's click that. All right, we're taking back to the detail page for that review. Notice it's now a 2 instead of 1. We got the updated review. We need to implement delete. Let's actually go back to our template though, and let's make sure we appropriately show add or update. So the simple way to do that would be add an if statement. If is adding, we'll call it. Then we want to call that add review, else, and we can do this conditionally. Else, we'll call it update review. And then don't forget to end your blocks, always easy to forget. And if, right, so I'm going to copy that, and that's going to be the same for here, I guess. That should work. We have an H1 tag, have a bunch of stuff nested in it. It's really this F statement. Let's see if that works. Everything else should be, oh, I need to do this too. You know what, I'm gonna make this easier on myself. I'm just gonna do something like action. All right, so I'm just gonna actually just pass text in so I don't have to do this repeatedly. Let's save me some headaches. So action will be a text value I pass in. And I'll go there. And I'll also go here. All right, since I'm using that conditional many times, now I need to go back to my views and specify a value for action. So action in this case is going to be add. So this is the create case. And then the action for info is going to be update.
That's cute. I like that.
Yep, makes it easier. Again, maybe not the most dynamic way of doing that, but I don't want to have so many if statements. So let's see if that works. So we go to update again. Cool, it says update here. I got update on my button and update in my title up here. So that looks like that works. Let's make sure our new didn't get screwed up. Oops. Add review. All right, add. That looks good. Okay, that was that. Let's do our delete case just because we're doing delete for the assessment. Want to make sure we know how to do that. So let's create a route for that quickly. So I'm going to copy my update. So it's going to be essentially the same route. Just instead of update, I'll do delete. Delete there. Delete for the handler name. And delete for the route or the URL. All right, so delete, we need to add a review delete. That should be fairly straightforward. Let me copy this. And delete will be same values, return HTTP response, successfully deleted that beer or beer. What are we doing? We're doing a review. Review with ID. Review ID for beer with probably can get more descriptive here by looking up the beer, but I'm just going to use the ID. So that means nothing to the user. All right, and this needs to be an F string. So we actually capture those values. All right. So we actually,
beat ID.
thank you. All right, so we actually want to check that this review actually exists. So let's copy the code from up here. And I'm doing a lot of copying, so that's probably hinting to me I probably should condense this into like a method where I can get the review. So we get a review from review ID. Yada yada. Okay, so assuming we have a review, which is a review dot delete that kosher. Let's give that a try. So I'm gonna save that. Let's go back to our edit reviews. So I have some duplicate reviews for Tastes Like Water from Sean K and Good from Sean K. So let's actually delete the duplicate one. So I'm gonna go to delete. That didn't do anything.
I don't think you added the href for delete.
Yep, just my thinking. You were one step ahead of me. Yep, that button has no functionality. It's just the button that you can click, but doesn't actually go anywhere. Let's actually add that. Copy what I had up here for my update because the path is essentially the same. The name of that route is delete, and same variables get passed for delete. So let's save that. Good catch there, Sarah. Let's refresh. All right, let's see if it actually deletes it. All right, cool. Successfully deleted review with ID 4 for beer ID 1. Again, that's not useful to the user. You should probably show what beer instead of the ID because they shouldn't care about IDs. But with that, let's actually go back to the reviews for here. Nope, not new. All right, so notice that that review was deleted. So instead of showing a message, what if we want to redirect back to this page? So like I don't manually have to go back to it. Let's do that instead. So if I go to my deletes, instead of showing successfully deleted, let's redirect. So we'll do redirects. The route we want to go back to is the review list. And then the parameters were beer ID should equal beer ID. All right, so review list, again, if we look at review list, which is up here, review list takes in only a beer ID. So that's what we need to specify. So that's what I'm trying to match up here. So we have beer ID for our deletes. We can use that to redirect, and that should let us do it. So let's delete one more. Amazing. I don't think Eric B actually thinks it's amazing. So let's delete this review. All right, so notice we got deleted and redirected to back to the reviews list. Any questions on updating or delete functionality?
No, thank you for all of this.
No,
Ankur. I appreciate it.
absolutely. I always get to have reviews, especially for assessments. So the few things I didn't do, hopefully you guys are okay with either doing it on your own or at least understand it. For my beer, I didn't have the CRUD functionality. It's the same process where you add a form. Again, you don't have to reuse the form template. I just do it because again, it's essentially the same thing with the only difference being like some text values. So instead of creating a new template, I think it makes sense to reuse it. Also for your views, let's do one more step, if you guys don't mind. Since this code is so similar, I want to condense it. Again, we don't want to have repeated code. So I'm going to create a new method. Let's call it process review form. This will take in a few values. Let's say an action value, which is what this is going to be. And then in our update case, we have a review ID. Right? Let's see. Actually, let's pass in a review object. So new review, default's going to be none. All right, so now my goal is to basically condense all this good stuff into something much less redundant. So I copy this, drop this in here. So we're still going to want a form. We need a request object, so it looks like. We request objects, an instance if you pass it in, otherwise it'll default to none. Post, all this stuff is the same. Error message will be generic. All right, so does this actually give us back something? So if you do save, that should pass you back the object that it saved. So that's how I can capture review in the add case. So if we do action here, which is going to be the text value, I think I have all the pieces I need. Okay, so we're going to get a review in this case. We want to return process review form and pass in all the requirements. So request is our first parameter for our function. Action is going to be update in this case, and review, we do have an object. Okay, similarly, now we should be able to leverage that function for here. I guess my beer is going to be, okay, so it's going to be a little tricky. Let's see if we can work through it. So it's going to be add. Instead of review, we're going to have a beer. So maybe add in a beer. You know what, let's just pass in a form. So I'm going to get rid of this form here, and we're going to pass in a form to this. Therefore, I can create the proper forms I want. In this case, I want an instance with a review. Pass in the form here. And then for my create case, I want to have initialize it with the beer value. So I want to create my own form there and pass in the form. So we got rid of a lot of redundancies. We still are creating a form object, still have a try except, but this is much more centralized so that, all right, that should work. Review, we don't have a review here. We need a beer here. All right, we'll pass in a beer. Let's see. Sorry, maybe we need a review up here. Equals none. Let's review here. All right, let's try that. Let's review that beer, and this should be beer. Okay, let's give this a try, make sure it works, and then we can get you guys onto your assessment. So again, I just want to condense it. This is highly recommended, but not required. We've talked about this like in week 1, 2, and 3. It's good not to have redundant code. You want dry code, don't repeat yourself code. So let's see if this works. Maybe I broke something, maybe I didn't. All right, refresh. Let's go to updating. Tastes like water. Let's update that. Oops, none type, no attribute beer. So I screwed up something for sure. Beer. Oh, let's shoot beer down here. Okay, so it tastes like water, but I like water. Let's keep it as, let's make it okay, update review. All right, looks like that works. We're taken to the update page. Let's go back, because I probably should add a back button, but let's go to admin review. Say, I hate this beer. There. It's gonna be, let's say admin is adding review of terrible. Add review. All right, there we go. Reviewer is admin. Rating of 1. I hate this beer. But let's say you want to delete it. Click delete. That still works. Okay, so we implement our functionality, then we iterated upon it to clean up our code, but you still want to make sure it works. So what I was getting at before was we did the CRUD, full CRUD for our nested items, which is reviews. We do the CRUD for our beers, which are our top level, but again, same process. Create a form, handle the post request, and save it to your database. Same thing we're doing here. All right, any last questions that anyone has about Django, creating a Django project, doing nested CRUD, anything else you guys want to go over?
No, I'm probably going to follow along after you upload
Sure.
everything.
Yeah, it's going to take some time because Zoom's got to process the video and then YouTube's got to process the upload. So it takes anywhere from an hour, a couple hours. I'll try to have that up as soon as possible. I'll post in the Oscars chat once it's completed. So let me stop recording here.